And we are live. Hey there, everybody. This is Shauna Bremenkamp with SolaGratiaLife.com, where together we as women are pursuing a life of holiness by grace alone. And today I am so excited to bring on Yvonne Strachan of inspirationalhomeschooling.com. And she is also the radio host of a local Colorado radio station called PowerTalk, where they talk about everything homeschool and everything biblical as well. So welcome, Yvonne. So glad to have you here.
Thank you, Shauna. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to learn everything about homeschool, especially for those that are just starting to get into homeschool or maybe curious about it. So how would you explain that to somebody who's completely new to homeschool and it seems a little intimidating for them?
Oh, yes. If I'm talking to a Christian homeschool mom, the first thing I want to do is encourage them because so many of us moms feel unequipped. I mean, from before we're even have a child, we are always wondering, well, let's see, well, what are we doing right? And oh, this person's doing that. And you just kind of sometimes feel like, oh, well, maybe I should be doing this. For instance, if somebody is feeding a child formula and you want to breastfeed, but you don't know if that's okay or vice versa. And then you may feel inferior. And so I just tell people, think in the Bible. About Abraham, he was called out of his own village, his own, everything he's known, to go into a place that is unknown. And he just really had to trust God and be faithful. And he did that, and God blessed the generations. And God has showed us time and again that with Moses, he called him and he said, I am not a speaker. How am I going to speak to people? And God equips you along the way. So that's the very first thing I try to tell, homeschool parents that are thinking about it. The second thing is we need to be the parents of our kids, which is biblical. We don't need to have somebody in between us and our children, right? We
Right.
are in charge of our children. God gave us those children to take care of, and he entrusted us with them. So we are the number one equipped person to raise our children, to educate our children. And we've been doing that since infancy anyway. So you
Yeah.
just continue along the way. And you learn as you go. We don't need to know everything. There are so many resources out there that can help us. And, I've learned so much through homeschooling. My faith has been built through homeschooling. Our relationships, I thought they were close, but they became even closer with
Wow.
homeschooling.
Wow,
Yes.
that's so encouraging to hear, especially for somebody who is not a mother yet, but is very much looking forward to being a mother and homeschooling soon. That is so encouraging. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So the next thing I wanted to ask you is, so with homeschooling, you described it as something that we don't have to be afraid of. There's a lot of resources out there. So, for example, we're based in Colorado. What are some of the things that we should be looking into for not only in Colorado, but if you're living in any state? How do you actually access information to know what the regulations are, what forms to fill out, where, if we even need to have standardized testing? How would you go about that?
All right. So you can check your state's homeschooling laws. And I actually have that on inspirationalhomeschooling.com. I have them all linked so you can just go to your state's homeschooling laws. I thought that would just be easier for people to just link to those. But you do want to check those and see, because every state's homeschooling law is different. For instance, in Colorado, we need to do testing in 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th grades. And we need to put in a notice of intent by the time the child is 7 years old. We need to start homeschooling or teaching them. And then there's different subjects that they want us to teach our children. But there are other states like Oklahoma where it's just written in the state constitution and you don't really need to do much of anything as far as
Wow.
reporting. Yeah.
Wow,
And
how
then in Washington,
convenient.
yeah. And then in Washington State, you, if you don't have a degree, you actually go through a small course before you start homeschooling. And so, and on the East Coast, there are some states where you need to meet with the district and show them a portfolio. So you have to prepare a portfolio. So every state is different, and it is important to check those state laws from the state in which you reside. So the
Right.
other thing is, you're talking about resources, right? Well, there are so many resources out there. There's different curriculum. And then there's things that you can do outside of homeschooling through a curriculum that a lot of people use as well. And there are people that kind of create their own um, like plan, I guess it would be the best way to say it. And they'll incorporate science in activities and field trips and actually experiencing some of those things. I just interviewed somebody who was road schooling for the last 5 years, and they visited all the national parks and incorporated that into their science curriculum. And so you can there's so much flexibility in it. As far as curriculum goes, I usually tell people, hey, if you can go to a homeschool conference, that is amazing because you can get the hands-on look at all the curriculum out there. And there's so much Christian curriculum out there. One of the favorites that we have in our homeschool is BJU Press, but there's so many different options out there. And I just tell people, if you're Christian, just make sure that whatever you use has that biblical worldview, because that's going to be a big guide in you raising your children and bringing them up in the Lord. For instance, in history or in reading, when I'm going through things with the kids, it's like, well, what did this character do? What did they decide? How does this relate to what the Bible says? And what might you have done? Or what might they have done different if they know what the world looks like today because of some of the programs that they implemented in case of history? And so we can learn it from every subject and every study, but then also compare it to what the Bible says. And that's so incredibly important. The kids need to know that everything that you do in life, every question you have in life, there really is an answer in the Bible. And so I tell people, hey, if you're working with your kids and you're looking at media or whatever it is, and there's a question that comes up or something that you really feel you need to talk about, you can go into like Open Bible Info and put in, listening to your parents, and a lot of Bible verses come up, and that helps you to just guide that initial step. And well, what does the Bible say about this? And as you're doing that, your kids will learn that they can search pretty much any question that they have in the Bible, and they start relying on God's word instead of man's word. And they can even see a discrepancy sometimes in what you may do or say as a mom, but that's where we go, right?
Yeah.
And I've had my kids say, hey, mom, this isn't right. This is what you should be doing. I'm like, oh, we need to be humble, but we learn along the way and we grow. And my faith has grown tremendously raising these children.
Yeah, and that's actually a positive thing, right? Because it's sort of like a student surpasses the teacher kind of a situation. So that's sort of what you want, is you want your kids to be smarter than you eventually. And I love that you mentioned that, because it's such a protection against this crazy world right now, as the lid of evil is being lifted and more of God's restraint of evil is being lifted. We see more and more the depravity of man, really, whether you're a believer or an unbeliever. So it's really important to instill those kinds of skills, to practice looking at everything with the biblical worldview. What's a little bit more that you can say about protecting your children against the world that we live in now?
Yes. So as you see your children go through or be influenced by media, whether it's the news or a movie, or maybe they're influenced by a neighbor, and you just, go through, okay, well, this is the scenario that we're looking at right now. And let's look together what God says about this and how we can respond. Or let's look at how you responded and what you can do different next time. So I think that's really important to help them. And then also realize that, there are things that are happening here that are not biblical. And like you said, there's a lifting on the evilness in this world where it just seems like it used to be kind of in the shadows, but now it seems like it's really not in the shadows. Everything's just been poof,
Yeah,
out in our world.
absolutely.
But see, this is the thing, you take God out of anything. And what's the question? What happens? What's going to fill in, right? You're taking God out. Something's going to fill in.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. So, what is the challenge then if you are not in a two-parent household? Say if somebody out there is a single parent with one or multiple children even, or they're in a household where both parents have to work. How do you negotiate those challenges? And is homeschooling feasible for those kinds of households?
Absolutely. And that is a great question. There's a lot of people that say, hey, both of us have to work. We can't do this. Or there's people that say, I'm a single parent. How am I going to provide for my kids and then also raise them and educate them at home? Well, I'm telling you, so many people do that. I work in homeschool. I write, I speak. I've consulted for homeschool families for over 7 years and hundreds of
Wow.
homeschool families each year. And I'm telling you, there's parents that there's different resources like video lessons that you can do out there, and then you can manage it and still look at their grades and things like that. There are parents that take more of the academics in like 3 or 4 days when they're off. Like, let's say they're working 4 days a week. And then sometimes they'll even have them learn more in the evenings or sometimes when they're off and have a flexible schedule that way. So there are things that you can do that way. One nice thing for like single parents or parents that maybe have lost a spouse is that HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they have compassion grants that you can apply for. And that is really helpful because it can help you afford some of these different options that you can use in your homeschool. And there are also many free options out there as well. There are so many resources at the library. And there are some resources even on the internet that are free that people can use to homeschool.
That's awesome. That is so helpful because I know that there's a lot of I'm a part of a lot of homeschooling forums, and time again, I see a lot of anxious parents that are in single parent households where they're wanting to homeschool their kids because they want to have that protection over their kids, but they don't know where to start. They're overwhelmed because they think that you need a two-parent household or you need to be a stay-at-home mom to pull it off. But from what you say, that's absolutely not true. It is doable.
Absolutely. And I really encourage those parents out there, those single moms or those working parents, single dads even, to homeschool because it is so important to just have that interaction with your child and know what's going on, know what they're being exposed to, because then you can address it. I mean, if you find out days later or months later what they've been exposed to in school or something that they have done, it's not going to be as effective.
That's absolutely true. So, what are some of the challenges of, say, parents out there that might have a child with special needs, whether it be autism, cerebral palsy, or Down syndrome? What are some of the considerations for homeschool parents that have a child with special needs?
Yes, so this is great that you asked this question. My oldest daughter has special needs. She has Turner syndrome, so 1X chromosome. And so we've had some learning difficulties along the way. And so there's so many points that I want to say. I mean, one of the things is Jesus was out with his disciples, right? And his disciples, they all come upon this blind man, and the disciples ask him, "Hey, what has caused this man to be blind? Is it him who sinned, or is it his parents who sinned?" And
Mhm.
Jesus goes, it is not him or his parents. This has happened so that God will be glorified through it. And it's just amazing that, I see that in my daughter, that God is glorified time and again through her innocence and her love. And she's always happy, and the influences that she has in other people's lives because of that. But the thing is, we can't discount the difficulties in educating them, right? Yeah, with Down syndrome, with Turner syndrome, some of those things, it is difficult. I mean, my daughter would pace and pace and pace and pace and not know what to do next. So I would have to stay on top of, okay, well, I need to be working with her pretty much constantly. And one of the things that I noticed, I mean, God, it's amazing. I mean, you can have somebody who's blind, but they can hear really incredibly well, and they can see what, kind of like see what's going on around them. But God does that through everything. I mean, we all have strengths and weaknesses, whether we may not be considered that we have a disability in this world, but I mean, really all of us has strengths and weaknesses, right? So if we look at our children that same way through God's eyes, we can notice that he gave them some really special strengths, and we can speak to those strengths. So like with my daughter, facial relational stuff, processing quickly, those kind of things are really hard for her. But yet she was so intrigued by stories and so intrigued by trying to write. And so I would say, okay, well, one day she was pacing back and forth. And I'm like, if you don't know what to do, and I'm working with another child because I have 5 children. So I'd be like, why don't you read or write? And then I'll know that I can come to you when you're doing that, and then pull you back into. So consequently, she reads so much and writes all the time. And
That's
now that
awesome.
now that she's graduated, we're working on her getting into editing, because the processing is very, very slow. But the memorization, what she can remember, is immense. And so she remembers all those writing and grammar rules and everything. And so I can work with her on editing, and she edits my blogs and my book. And I try to incorporate her into that. She's part of a writers group in our homeschool group. She's kind of managing that. So we can really lift these kids up and really use the way that God made them. And so, that's true with anything. I mean, if you have a Down syndrome child, they certainly have some beautiful strength, and then just see the beauty in who they are and see how they impact other people's lives, like through that's another one where they're so innocent and happy all the time. I don't know if you've ever met some of the Downs. I mean, they're just
Yeah, we
so
actually have a
beautiful.
friend who has special needs, and he is very much like that, just
Yeah,
happy all the time, has the best laugh, and just
yeah.
sees the good in people.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful to see the world in their eyes. And
Yeah.
if they're having troubles with certain things, and like I said, every child, every person, we have hardships with certain things. So I have this thing that I'm speaking on this year at conventions, where what do you do if a child is having a hard time reading and they have dyslexia? My 3rd child actually has that. And how can you work with them instead of just saying, okay, well, you don't have to read, it's too difficult for you? How can I help them? And then how can I work together as a family to help them? So there was some things that I had come up with over the years to just make it fun. Well, he is so active and everything. And so one of the things, for instance, was take his words, and then he liked Nerf guns. So shoot those words with Nerf guns, or in the
That's
summer
awesome.
with laminate them and use water guns. Maybe your
Yeah,
mom went too.
that sounds
But
so fun.
yeah, so just make it fun and kind of speak to what they enjoy, and then pull in games or different things to solidify it as a family too.
Yeah.
So we've done that with reading, we've done that with handwriting, and I've had to do that with all kinds of different things. And then the other thing is, I tell people, when you're dealing with disabilities, is take it at their pace and at their level. You don't have to have them at, okay, well, they're at age 6th grade. No, that's not, you don't have to have them at that level. You just want to show progress. And even
Right.
in our Colorado laws, we do have the option of having an evaluator go ahead and evaluate the child instead of them doing those standardized tests, which is amazing. And I love that that's built in, because when we have a special needs child, they're going to sometimes be at a different level. And all we need to do is show progress. They're progressing and we're working with them. And I think that when I tell parents that, it's just like you could just see them. Oh, I graduated my oldest daughter at age 21 when I thought she was ready, and we worked through OT just to help her like figure out how to vacuum, for instance, because she was vacuuming in one spot over and over. And I was like, I don't know how to get her to vacuum a whole room. So the OT specialist drew out kind of the shape of the room and gave her a little length of a crayon, and would show her, color here, move it, and then color here. And this is how you vacuum. She vacuums now, and she does
Oh,
a great
that's
job.
awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So the OT specialist was key in helping me realize that when somebody has something hard, we just need to put our thinking caps on and see
Yeah.
how we can help them work through it. And, it may not be done perfect, but, they feel good that they're also contributing. And I think that's so important.
Yeah. And that's really the crux of homeschooling, isn't it? It's providing a well-rounded education for your child, but at the same time, setting them up for success and really amplifying their strength so that they have the confidence to go out into the world and contribute to society.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
we just go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say, and it's just such a blessing that we see them and work with them every day. And so we can see that, and we can just, like you said, we can just hold them up in that, and, encourage them along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do have, you've already gone through the experience of graduating your homeschool child. So what is the next step after that? If for some reason they want to go to a trade school, they want to learn a specialized vocation, or if they want to go to college and become a scientist or a doctor, how do you transition that? And what are the qualifications? Can you go into that a little bit?
Yes, every child is different. And I think that's one of the things that homeschooling parents sometimes think is, okay, I need to prepare my kid exactly for college. And I think it's wonderful to do that, because we don't know where they're going to go. And oftentimes college can help with those specialized fields, like being a doctor or being a police officer or whatever it is. But also sometimes trade schools are the best way to go for your child. I mean, there are certain trades that, being an electrician or a plumber, sometimes you want to work on those apprenticeships instead. Or maybe you want to work on some certifications, like if the child wants to do AutoCAD or maybe fly, then maybe they want to work on their pilot's license. And there are ways to do that in homeschooling. And that's what's so amazing, is you have that flexibility. Now, if you do want to prepare them for college, that's going to look a little bit different than if you're going to prepare them for some of the different, a trade school or something. So when you get to high school, if you want to kind of look at the colleges or think that they would like to in the long run, or just even prepare them for maybe if they go to a trade, but then later on want to go to college, you're going to want to record what you're doing with them. So essentially you want to make a transcript, because when they go to college, a lot of times those colleges, most of the colleges have homeschool admissions officers. So in my experience, what they're asking for is the transcript. And they're also asking for that SAT or ACT score. And so you just really want to prepare them also for that test. Those are not easy tests. And if you've been working with your child with a curriculum, a lot of the curriculums will help prepare them for that test already. And then you can also go to a place like Huntington Learning Center, where they have tutors that just help them prepare for that test as well. And that was incredibly valuable for my second daughter that I just graduated this year. And so for her to go to college, that SAT score was huge. They were like, oh, you got this SAT score? Well, you're good to go. And I was like, oh, well, don't you want to see the transcript? Oh, yeah, that's fine too. But, like that was a big part. And some of the different colleges also want certain science courses. And in those science courses, they also want like 8 minimum hands-on labs. So you want to really make sure that you have written down what they're doing and really produce that transcript. And then if you're using a curriculum, then you can also bring that scope and sequence, because that already has the paragraphs of what they've learned. So that takes some of that guesswork out of what you need to do. Or sometimes you can look at those scope and sequence if you have created something on your own and kind of utilize that to help describe what you have done with them. So yes, you can absolutely prepare them for college. They can, just about every college will have that homeschool admissions officer where they're going to work with the homeschooling now. In fact, a lot of colleges want homeschoolers because a lot of those homeschoolers that go to college are really good at self-management, time management, and self-study. So they do extremely well in college.
Yeah, that's very important to know. What good information. So, how do you go about accessing those kinds of hands-on labs? Is there a special website that you can go to that will refer you to places, or do you have to look for those lab situations by yourself?
I think probably the easiest way when you get into high school is to probably use a curriculum that's already set up. That's probably the easiest, and especially some of these curriculums have video lessons where they help them set up the lab, and then you can pick 8 of those where they can actually perform them in your kitchen. There is all kinds of resources out there as far as getting some of the lab equipment that you need. One of the biggest ones is home science tools. That's one of the biggest ones that homeschoolers use, but there's usually local places as well that sell homeschool curriculum, different things like that, or stuff for schools as well. And so you can research on the internet or find things locally that you would need for some of those labs, because some of them need chemicals that you just cannot buy in the store.
That's right.
Yeah,
Those mad scientists that we have in our homes.
right. Absolutely. So we have a science cabinet on our home, and our kids just know, hey, we need to go to that science cabinet, grab what we need, and do the setup that we need. And in high school, I do like the videos with that because well, first of all, having 5 kids, it's but hard to be able to manage all of those different aspects of things. But if they have those video lessons, they can look at how it's supposed to be set up and then go ahead and orchestrate it. And sometimes, I'm just around to take a few pictures. And sometimes I'm just curious and I like to participate as well. And sometimes the other kiddos gather around and enjoy seeing that as well, especially when you're dissecting a frog or something like that.
Yeah, I could just imagine how fun that could be. So, my next question is, so I'll use myself as an example. I am not good at math, never have been since I was little. And my husband is okay at math, but I don't know if he would be confident in teaching it. So how do you outsource that kind of class? And is it best to join a co-op in that situation? And how do you even go about navigating co-ops and all that entails?
Oh, that's a great question. And that actually also brought me to what we were just talking about. And I was thinking, oh, I forgot to mention that, people can also go to co-ops and do science labs with their co-op as well. And that's another way that they can incorporate those even without using like a curriculum or videos. So in co-ops, for instance, and they pop up all over the state, all over the nation. Some are more organized, some are small groups. So a small group would be like, maybe you have like 3 to 5 parents that get together, and one teaches art and one teaches science and one goes through labs, and you just kind of do some school together, which is amazing because then you get that family integration and some of that socialization. And then you have some of those larger co-ops where you pay to take some of the classes there. Sometimes you can drop off the kids. Some of the co-ops require you to participate. And again, it's going to depend what co-op you're part of for what they offer. So some will have like science and labs and art and music and all kinds of different things. And some co-ops actually incorporate the whole family. So they have something for older, high schoolers all the way down through kindergarten. And again, like you're saying, math, is one of those too. So a lot of homeschool moms, and this is, I think, what's so beautiful about the homeschool community, is a lot of homeschool moms go, okay, somebody help me with math, and that's awesome. What can I pour into the homeschool community? How can I help? And I'm telling you, it's absolutely amazing. There's so many moms, so many dads that have kind of either been part of these co-ops where they want to give back, so to speak, or just offering tutoring or something like that. So that's another option. You can go into, get somebody to tutor your child. You can incorporate video lessons like I've talked about before, and those are usually pre-recorded so they can watch them and then work on it, and then you can grade it. Now, the other thing I want to mention is when I'm not one of those big math-minded people either, and nor is my husband, so I'm kind of in the same boat as you. But for the grade school, what I did was I had the teacher's edition, and then I had the student workbook. And in my teacher's edition, I thought it was amazing because I was never a teacher before. It would say, okay, write this on the board or talk, show, blocks or whatever, and have 3 red blocks and 2 red blocks, and then join them together. So you have 3 + 2 = 5. And it really taught me how to teach them. And so I'm like, well, I can't do this. All I just need to do is kind of follow along. And then by the time I got to my 5th one, I'm like, oh, I know how to do that. So this is what we're going to do with, teaching edition. And this is what we're going to do, and then when you get into those higher grades, that's where it became a lot harder for me. So like 7th and 8th grade were really quite a challenge with my first one. I feel like I could go up to 8th grade pretty well now. But when I get into like algebra 2, geometry, and calculus, forget it. That's when we outsource.
Yeah, I know how you feel. Just you saying those words, geometry and algebra, I'm like shivering over here. So what are some, let's see, what do I have here? Does it get discouraging or exhausting sometimes? No matter what the situation is, how do you bounce back from that feeling of that feeling that we women always get, right? Not being enough, not doing enough, not being there enough for your kids. How do you bounce back from that? How do you navigate it?
Right. Yeah, as a homeschool mom, I mean, we just want to do and be the best for our kids. So yeah, absolutely. I think, I don't know if I feel that every day, but I mean, I could go to bed every night and go, oh, I could have done this different. I'm not enough. I could do this better. Or I see my friends or other people at the co-op doing something different. Or sometimes if you see on Facebook or something, these beautiful homeschool rooms or whatever it is. And it's so easy to compare. And so the first thing I want to do is encourage parents is don't compare yourself to others, because if we're comparing ourselves to others or putting our self-worth into what others think or do or say, we're not putting our self-worth in God. So we need to really look at, what does God say who I am? Let's look it up. What does God say? He says I am loved. He says I am capable, and her Bible verses all throughout the Bible on that. So sometimes just spending time in his word helps tremendously. And then also just having that support around you, a good friend, spouse. I can't tell you how many times I've wavered from what I was doing, going, oh, well, this friend is taking their kids out and they're having fun all the time. And I'm sitting here with, my infant. I can't even get dressed in the morning, I feel like a failure. And he's like, okay, honey, you're homeschooling 5 kiddos and, everybody's safe. And, nobody got hurt today. I call that a win. And I'm like, oh, okay. or I don't have supper on the table. Well, let me help you out, and just having that where he's like, okay, I'll make supper then, or let's do it together. I mean, just so huge. I mean, so that
Yeah.
support is tremendous. And then just turning to the Bible for that encouragement is also just a tremendous thing, because the enemy hates families, hates homeschooling, of course, because that brings families closer together every day, and it's harder to infiltrate, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to have that battle with the enemy every day, sometimes every second.
Oh, yeah.
And so just realizing who our battle is with and that God is on our side is tremendous.
Yeah, I love that so much. And that's so true. When you have a partner that is very supportive and you really are a team, that helps so much. What kind of encouragement would you give somebody who, like myself, is not a parent yet, or their child is maybe an infant, obviously not homeschool age? What kind of encouragement would you give them as they're preparing or thinking about homeschooling in the future?
Oh, yes. So let's say, yeah, you don't have kids yet, and you want to homeschool because this is going to be the right thing. Or you have this infant and you're going, okay, I know I need to homeschool, but how am I going to prepare them? Just as an infant, or before you even have children, knowing you want to homeschool is absolutely amazing. So enjoy that time. You can look into, things like this, like where people are talking about it, to encourage you, and just get in your mind where that support would be, or what that would look like. That is so huge when they're little. And then as they're growing, just remember, oh, I'm working with them every day, and I know what they love, and I know what makes them upset. I know what makes them cry. And oh boy, when I'm homeschooling, I'm going to see all these same things, and I'm going to be able to go, oh, well, this makes them really upset, and how can I address it? And so you're going to start thinking about, okay, I'm already working with them, and I'm already teaching them. I'm just going to be teaching more things as they get older. And you would be doing that anyway. As we mature, we learn more things, right? And we're being taught more things, and we're absorbing more things. So as a child is young, I mean, basically one of the biggest things is the discipline part, really,
Mhm.
because and not just the child's discipline, our discipline, right? So
Yeah.
we need to be committed as well. So for instance, if we're not present and we're on our phones, we're probably not disciplining. We're kind of like, so just, I think the biggest thing is to just be present with them when they're little. And then as they're growing, discipline them in the way of the heart. So let's say they have Legos all over the floor, and you may step on one and go, oh, that hurt. But what you're going to be doing is teaching them is, hey, let me help you pick up these Legos, because it's not just that it bothers me, it's that if they're on the floor, somebody could get hurt.
Yeah.
And I know that you love everybody around you. And so let's work together to care for the people that live together with us, like for whoever, your sisters, your brothers, myself as mom, that I know you love me so much. And so, help me pick up these Legos so I don't get hurt. So
Yeah.
just kind of looking at that heart. Or if you spill something on the floor, well, it's point out, hey, this is slippery. Somebody could fall. And I know you love your family. Let's work together, and then make it fun. If they spill something on the carpet, oh, let's put this towel on it and let's do the cleanup dance. So you just show them how you jump on it to absorb it. And then next time they can jump on it to absorb it. So make it fun, but also just make it like a heart issue, like I care for others. Because I think one of the biggest things in homeschooling is that as you're teaching them and you're preparing them for the way that God made them and the gifts that God gave them, you want them to use those gifts to serve others. And there's
Yeah.
a big difference than if you use those gifts and you just are providing for yourself. Oh, like I want to be a nurse, for instance, because I can make enough money to pay for this type of house and have this type of family or whatever. No, I want to be a nurse because I love others and I care for others and I want to make a difference in others' lives. There's a whole, it's 100% different. And so
Yeah.
if you start from that infancy on, working with the heart and training them up, and then showing them their gifts, and then how can they use these gifts to serve others, and then they launch and they're going to do amazing things, and God is going to work through them their whole lives.
Yeah, and that really makes all of us, our children and ourselves, better witnesses to a broken, sinful world, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So what does your house situation look like when you homeschool? Do you have a corner? Do you have a designated room? What is the best layout, I guess, for a homeschool environment? And what are some of the basics that you would need if somebody, if they don't have a whole lot of money and they want to give their child the best homeschool situation, but they don't have a whole lot to work with?
Okay. Yeah. And that's a great point that you made up. There's a whole dynamic as far as what you can do with what your home looks like. So let's start with somebody that has a really small home and really just not a lot of space, right? And so um, they probably won't be able to have a homeschool room, but they do probably have a couch or they have a kitchen table. And so all you need is maybe something that a bookshelf even, or someplace to put, your books or some of your materials, or maybe a cabinet to put the Play-Doh and all of those things in. And then you can just bring it out as you're working through some of those different subjects with them. And you can incorporate some different videos, YouTube, some of these different videos as you're teaching them as well. And so your homeschool could look like the kitchen table that you clean up at lunch, or the couch, and some books in a basket and some Play-Doh in the cabinet. So
Yeah.
there are free resources out there on the internet as well, different math games or different things that you can play, and so many manipulatives and STEM toys out there that flood our markets that we can use. So you can do that if you don't have very much income or a very large home. Now, you don't always have to teach them in your kitchen or your living room as well. You can go take a blanket and have a picnic outside and learn out there. My kids at this time of year, we spend most of our time outside on our picnic table out there, and it's a joy. We've also taken a few things and gone up in the mountains, and
Wow.
just hike up there and, sit in a peaceful area and just work on, one subject or whatever it is. So it doesn't have to be your home, and it doesn't have to be a specific homeschool room. Now, for us, we do have a homeschool area. My husband thought it was amazing to have lockers because I don't know, he just had in his idea that we should have lockers. So that's where we keep all of our homeschool materials. And it's kind of neat because it has doors that, close. And then we just have a table with 4 chairs around it. And we just bring out some things there. But I found that most of the time we're taking those things out of that locker and going up to the living room. Sometimes I'm making lunch in the kitchen and I'm having them read to me, and then I'll pause and then ask them questions, what did this character do? What do you think about it? Those kind of things, and relate it to the Bible. So even though we have a homeschool room, we don't really spend all of our time in the homeschool room. It's more like a place to put things. But it also gives us that opportunity if my husband's home, because he's home one day during the week, if I need that separation, because it's so hard to homeschool with him home. I just want to spend time with them, and so do the kids.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
Exactly.
we have to do a field trip day, and we really want to be getting some of this other stuff done. We need to probably go to the
Right.
homeschool room. So it does
Right.
give us an opportunity. And then, some people have like science cabinets and different things like that. So things that you need for homeschooling, that was the other part of your question. Pencils, papers, when the kids are younger, probably Play-Doh, blocks, things that can help them visualize what they're learning. Printer has been huge for us, like a copier printer. And I just like the ones with toner, because if I don't use it as often, then it doesn't dry out. The ink doesn't dry out. So
Yeah.
use that. And then like your typical, rulers, markers, that kind of thing. And then if you're going to use curriculum, then you'll just want, that curriculum or access to a computer, like a laptop or an iPad. Some people will use that if they're using some of the videos and such. Some people use their phone if they're wanting to like look into something deeper and watch a YouTube video with their kids. But one of the biggest things is just, if you can be present, then you know what they're doing and you can address things along the way and orchestrate things that align with the Bible.
Yeah. And speaking of being present, I'm sorry, I keep looking to the side and down. My dog, he's a big lab. He keeps nudging my arm and legs to try and get attention. And you see, I'm passing off snacks to him under the table as I'm listening to you. So it's kind of a situation here. But yeah, I love everything that you said. And so then my next question would be, what are some of the things that we can do to kind of incorporate the Bible into everything that we do with homeschooling? And is it reasonable to try and incorporate the Bible into science or math or, other subjects that may not necessarily be typical Bible topics? How do you address that?
Right. I would say that the Bible is important in every aspect of life. So therefore, it should be in every single subject, literally.
Amen.
And that's incredibly important, because if it's not, then we're looking through a biblical worldview or biblical lens per se, in one aspect of life, but not another. And so we're sending the message that, God's word applies here, but not here. And there's no place for it here. So for instance, in science, there's curriculum out there that incorporates that biblical worldview. And that would be one of the things that I would ask as I'm looking for different curriculum or different resources, is what kind of worldview is this written through? And then, who are the authors or who are the producers and what are their beliefs? And that really is going to be big, because whether you're looking at literature or science, there is a difference. So trying to think of an example, if you are looking at something from a biblical perspective, okay, let's take the Grand Canyon, for instance. You have two worldviews, right? You have the worldview of creation and the flood. And then you have the worldview of God doesn't exist and we have evolution, right? So you would say, well, the Grand Canyon is amazing. Look at how this is created. Do you think this was created? The evolutionists would say, over millions of years, we've had different sediment, and the organisms that are more simple are at the bottom. And then, of course, you can tell that there's evolution happening, because as you get into the higher layers, of course, then you're going to have the bigger animals and the more complex animals. Then you look at the person that has a biblical perspective, and they would say, well, have you ever looked at any dam that's broke, any place that has had a flood? And you see that there's different layers of sediment that come in, right? And usually the smaller organisms and the things that move slower will settle into the sediment that's lower, right? And the bigger organisms would take longer to settle. And there is actually a case in science that we learned of in one of our science courses. I think it was earth science, where a tree actually goes through several layers. Well, how do they explain that when it's all crystallized and preserved at the same time? And so there are a lot of things that you can see that actually reinforces the Bible when you look at it through that perspective. And there is that different perspective. I mean, and you even take literature, for example, if you have a fallen world's perspective, what is right and what is wrong can be portrayed totally different. And literature is so incredibly impactful in what you are doing. And if you ever read like Apostate from Kevin Swanson from Generations,
Yes.
I mean, that's a huge, he explains the literature just so well. But I mean, everybody has a worldview. I mean, do we believe in us being able to make things better and science being able to make things better? Or do we believe that we are here for a purpose and that we're supposed to help one another and we can study this planet because God has great mercy and grace, and we can study this planet and use some of the resources that he gave us to help others and, just eat better or whatever it is, figure out when an earthquake is coming, things like that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful that you mentioned that, because there is so much confusing information out there, even for Christians. We are not a unified body, sad to say. So it's important for us who are grounded in the word and have a high view of scripture and a high reverence for the Lord, a fear of the Lord. It's important for us to be able to teach our children what's right and what's almost right, as Charles Spurgeon would say. So I love that you brought that up. And so what are some of the other things that really help you to juggle home life, homeschool life, and then also being out in the world and experiencing the world, but not being of the world? How do you juggle all of that?
Oh boy. Okay.
Sorry, that was a loaded question.
Okay. So home life and homeschool life, I mean, really, when we're homeschooling, it is intermingled like gears, right? And just trying to make those match up all at the right moment can be so difficult at times. I mean, we're trying to, sometimes manage a baby and make meals and teach our kids, and then sibling rivalry, and I mean, it just all goes together, right? So there are days that it's like I can't even manage manage. It may feel like, but if you have to pause and you have to work with that sibling rivalry, let's pause and work with that sibling rivalry, because it's so important to teach our kids that human life is important. Treating each other is incredibly important. We need to treat each other well. And so we need to just say to God, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to address what's in front of me. And thank you for bringing it to my attention. And thank you for working in the lives of my children and the lives in my own life too, because sometimes it's me that needs a little, humbleness. But managing, that can be hard. So there are some things that I've learned over the years. Like for instance, when you have multiple children, if I let my little kiddos play and then I bring them into like a more formal type of learning at some point, they push back. They're like, but I was playing and I was having so much fun and you're ruining it. Right? Hey, but who wouldn't? I'm the same way. If I'm out and then I come home after being out at some like hike or something with other homeschool families, I'm not going to come home and work on school. Are you kidding me? Just had fun.
Exactly.
I'm done. So I tell people, like, if you're wanting to do that, I mean, do that first. So work with your little ones first, or work on like your more sit down type things first, and then go out and do those co-ops or those hikes or things like that. Or take the things that they have to sit at and concentrate at earlier in the day and then work towards those science experiments and activities in the afternoon. And the second thing is let them know what your plans are, because if they don't know what your plans are, they may have different plans, and then you insert this other plan and pull them away from it.
Yes.
And that's frustrating for a child. So
Yeah.
if you implement kind of a routine, that will help a lot. And as they work through that routine, and it says 21 days to, it takes 21 days for somebody to be in a routine. So be patient and just keep working on that same type of routine every day. So for instance, we wake up, for us, we always say goodbye to my husband. So that's like the big thing. And then get ready. What's next? What's next after that? Well, let's sit down and work on, we always do our Bible study first. So we do our Bible study, and then, okay, well, the harder subjects. So let's work on math. While I'm working on math with this student, maybe I'm going to have this other one read something. And I kind of juggle between, this is what we're going to do. And they just kind of know what to expect next. And we're going to work on studies pretty much till lunch. And then after lunch, we may have like a co-op, or we may plan to go to a hike, or we may walk around the neighborhood. We may have ice cream, whatever. And if sometimes having that incentive toward the end of the day makes it fun and exciting, and it gives them something to work forward. So
Yeah. That's awesome. So what I'm hearing throughout our conversation here is the name of the game really is being grounded in the word, and also having a biblical worldview, and also being super flexible, right? Is that what you would say homeschooling basically is?
yes, you do need to be flexible for sure, because every child is working towards different things. They're made different, and we just need to ask God to help us to see them the way that He sees them. And yes, definitely be flexible, especially when you have several children of different ages. I mean, there's going to be times when you have to change a diaper or nurse a child in the middle of homeschooling. So put that thinking cap on and go, well, how can I do it? And if I can't, I'm going to pause.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because God does have a plan, and He will work through all of it. One of the things that I like to tell people is it was 2020, and I know 2020 was hard for a lot of people, but for us it was different hard. And the reason it was different hard was because my mom calls me up, and this was like April, calls me up one day, and she broke her wrist and her ankle. I had to take her to the emergency room. I was so thankful that one of the things that we do first thing in the morning is we get ready every day in the morning in case we do need to go somewhere. So I could like get up and go. Took her to the emergency room. Well, we had to move in with her because she couldn't even use crutches because it was her ankle and her wrist.
Oh no.
So we moved in with her. She was in a wheelchair. Moved in with her for 3 months. My husband was home, and he was a police officer at the time, so he was going through all of that, and I couldn't be here for him, which that kind of was hard too, because I know that was just very emotional for him. But we supported each other along the way, and my kids didn't get done with like every single lesson that year, but they did learn. They progressed, and 2 of them have graduated by now, and they've been fine that way. But also, what did they learn? They learned that this is what it looks like to care for grandma. And this is what it looks like to be together and really come together when there's an emergency. And that's so incredibly important, because when I'm older and I need help, I absolutely, I'd love for my children to have that same heart to help me, and maybe my grandkids too. And if I'm not showing that, how are they going to learn that?
Yeah.
So, just being flexible in what happens is great, because God will work through all of it. And it's just the way He is. He doesn't waste anything.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So now my final question for you is, so it's clear that being a mom, being a homeschool mom, on top of that, is more than a full-time job. It basically never stops, right? So I don't want our viewers to neglect self-care, not in a self-centered, inward-focused way, but in a way where we're taking care of the temple of the Holy Spirit, right? As it says in, I believe it's 2 Corinthians that says that. So how do moms nourish themselves, and how important is our spiritual health and our relationship with Jesus in pertaining to homeschooling? How important do those things coincide?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that your relationship with God is number one, and it says it in the Bible. I mean, it's before our relationship with our husbands and our children. So we need to put God first. I mean, that's just what we need to do. And you're right. I mean, um that is like the number one in self-care. So one of the things that I did when my kids were younger, and sometimes it's hard, I mean, you're nursing and everything, was I would just like look up a Bible verse. I mean, like, God, just speak to me today. And, pray that, everything that goes on in our world, just give me some like peace with it,
Mhm.
because it is easy for us to get like uptight because we're not
Yeah.
always in control of every second. But if we do that, um, we already align ourselves with him, and then we go throughout our day. And if you need to do this with your children, if they're up, just include them, just include them in it. And they may be just somewhat disruptive, but they're going to hear something. Somebody said to me once, they brought their children into church all the time, and they would give their children something to do, like draw or whatever. And they were like, oh, they're not even listening to the word. But pretty soon they draw less and they're looking up. Pretty soon they didn't even pick up their pads, So as you're working through that, they will see it. Um, so now that my children are older, that's one of the things that we love to incorporate is this, like, okay, let's sit down, give me your prayer requests. Let's pray for one another. Let's look up a Bible verse, and we just keep a little journal. And the daughter that loves writing, I just give her that. She has to write in the journal while we all work together through this. But one of my daughters was 10 years old at the time. And when I started using this process, and she goes, Mommy, are we going to do this every day? And I said, well, that's the hope. And she goes, oh, good, because when we don't get along. We fight and everything.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful. I love that. I love that. She's a very perceptive girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it does. It makes a
Yeah.
difference, and then in other aspects of life, taking care of yourself. I mean, we do need to take care of our bodies so we can take care of others. And I was one of these moms, and sometimes maybe I still am. I constantly work on this. Is like, I always want to do all these things. So I'm one of
Oh,
these moms
yes.
that wants to be superwoman and do it all myself,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Uh, and I know a lot of moms can relate. But I mean, God really brought me to my knees one year. I had my fourth child. And just before I had her, it was about 3 weeks before she was due, I fell in the bathtub and just really fell like kind of where my tailbone is. And so, they checked her and said, oh, she's fine, and I had some pain down my leg and such after, but I thought, okay, that's kind of can happen with pregnancy, right? So she was born. She had two big, I guess they call them hematobins or something. So big
Mm.
bumps filled with blood on her head where she had hit, but they said it was outside her skull, so it was fine.
Mm.
Um, and that most of it absorbed. She still has some like hard calcifications, but her hair covers it. And like for me, I had this baby and three other kids at home, and I herniated a disc. I didn't know. I couldn't get off the couch. I
Oh.
literally could only lay flat.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was like that for 6 weeks. We had to call in, and my husband was working, then coming home and trying to clean and manage the home because I literally couldn't get off the couch. When he worked, we had to find somebody to stay with me. So it was his mom or my mom or a friend or somebody. And so I felt like this person that couldn't do anything, that somebody had to take care of, and somebody had to take care of my kids. And I tell
Mhm.
you, that was so humbling. I cried. I mean, almost
Wow.
every day I cried because Here, I wanted to be the one taking care of my kids.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
my mom said, you know what? They're seeing you be humbled and letting other people help, and they see how precious that is, and
Mm.
they see the love in that, and they're helping. I mean, look at your kids are working on dishes and laundry and all these things while you're hurt. And I did heal in time. We
Yeah.
didn't actually start school that year until November. Um,
Okay.
and that was fine. It worked fine. Uh, so it was in hindsight, it was a good pause. It was a good learning
Yeah.
experience for me. Um, but just to be humbled in that and just know, it's all good. God works
Yeah.
through it all. He
Wow.
teaches us all something, and sometimes we are the ones that are humbled and need to be taught. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's so wonderful to hear. And you have me tearing up over here hearing
I'm sitting here
your
crying.
I know. It got kind of a moment over here. But yeah, that's just so important to talk about because so many times we as women, we want that control and we want to be able to do it all, even if we're offered help. We want to be the one to, I guess, prove to ourselves that we can do it all and that we can be all things to everybody. But that's not how God designed us. He designed us to be in community. And, if we are so blessed to be provided with a husband who is supposed to reflect a lesser representation of Jesus to us, we have to be humbled and say, yes, I need help and reach out for that help.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I've been so blessed by this conversation and I hope you enjoyed your time here with me.
Yes, I did. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for being here and giving us some of your precious time. So before we go into prayer and close our discussion here, what are some of the final things that you have to say about homeschooling and where could people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Oh, yes. I just want to encourage people that you can homeschool. I think one of the things that I realized in one of my last interviews was that sometimes us as homeschool parents get these questions from other homeschool parents that, oh, I could never do that, or whatever. Or you may feel like you're being put down. But that really isn't true, because what this person told me was that a lot of times other people think that we think that we're better than them, and that really isn't true. I mean, none of us feel that way as a homeschooler, that we're somehow better. We are not. We're just one of every parent out there that just cares for their kids. But homeschooling makes a tremendous impact on relationships. It it takes the other people out from in between you and your children,
Mhm.
and you know what they're learning every day. You can speak to their hearts, and you can really grow them as an individual and prepare them to serve others and glorify God their whole entire lives. So that would be my advice to you: is absolutely you can do it, and nobody is better than anyone else. God gave you the
Yes.
kids that he gave you, whether it's through fostering, whether it's through being a nanny like you. I mean, that's just absolutely amazing what you get to do as well. But you get to make an impact in those lives. And thank you for what you do. So
Yeah,
as far as yeah,
of
so as far
course.
as how people can find me, I have a blog and website called inspirationalhomeschooling.com. I try to put all the resources out there as far as conventions. Conventions are an amazing place to go to get encouraged, to find resources, and they're usually in the spring and summer months. So you'll want to look at those, usually like February and March, and then I always link it to the convention so you can make your reservations and everything. Um, Check your homeschool laws. I have a tab for that where it links to every state. And then blog posts that are encouraging and talks a little bit about my radio show. Our radio show airs on Saturdays and Sundays, Saturdays at 10 and 1, and Sundays at 10 at KPPF PowerTalk Radio in the Colorado Springs area in Colorado. on 1040 AM, 98.5 FM, and 95.7 FM. And then he also uploads it to YouTube and Podbean as well. You can find me on Facebook, Inspirational Homeschooling, Instagram. And then I also wrote a book called Inspirational Homeschooling. And this goes over a lot, everything we've talked about today and more, how to do a transcript, how to produce a resume, how to help your child who's disabled, how to manage your homeschool day, and how to keep God in the forefront. There's so much scripture study and everything interwoven in this book. So this book is really helpful for any homeschool mom. And it's written where each chapter is different. So you don't even have to read it from cover to cover. It's 430 pages or something, but you could read one chapter that speaks to you today and then just keep it as a resource. So it's kind of made more as a resource. And I'm hoping to write more books that are more specific to, preparing your child for trade school and how to be more confident in your homeschool. But those will be coming.
Yeah,
So
and we will all look forward to that.
Well, thank you. So I'm glad to talk to you today. Hopefully I'll get to speak at the CHEC conference this year as well, the Christian Home Educators Colorado Conference. And then we'll see from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll be sure to put all those links to what Yvonne mentioned down in the description box below so you could easily find her. Well, thank you so much, Yvonne, for giving us your precious time. And can I close us in prayer?
That would be wonderful, Shauna. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, Heavenly Father, just thank you for this gorgeous day. And thank you for life, for just being as close to us as our next breath, Lord. And thank you for my sister Yvonne for giving us her time to talk about homeschooling and, most importantly, educating our kids and serving our households with our eyes fixed on you and with a biblical worldview, Lord. Your gospel is amazing, and we want to be good witnesses to that, Lord. And so I just pray that as Yvonne goes about her days and goes about her work, that you would bless everything that she does, Lord, and that your mighty hand would be over all of what she does, Lord, and bless her family and bless everything that she touches, Lord. And also work in the hearts of everyone that she impacts, everyone that is in the sound of her voice, Lord, as she is your mouthpiece, really, to women and parents who are trying to homeschool with your word in mind, with your scriptures in mind. And I just pray that you be with Yvonne the rest of her day and bless that day, Lord, in your precious son's name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you next time, Yvonne, and I hope we do this again sometime.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.